In one particular book, the reason I put it on my book list in the spirituality subcategory is because this entire book just explains the sort of gut-wrenching experience of one woman who accidentally basically awoke without even knowing what awakening is. In her youth, she did some, when she was like in her early 20s and in her college days, she did some yoga practice and she did some meditation and so forth. But when she was doing it, nobody really explained to her what awakening is, what non-duality is. She didn't know any of that. She didn't really understand what God is or anything. She didn't have enough theoretical foundation, the kind of stuff that we've built here with Actualize.org if you've been watching for a while. She had none of that. She was just taught some meditation techniques. And she basically did that. And then one day, even after, she stopped doing them, but then one day just something clicked in her while she was walking down the street and she awoke. But this completely terrified her and she thought that something had gone terribly wrong. She thought that she was broken and dysfunctional. She thought she had some sort of mental illness. She spent the next 10 years going to therapists and doctors trying to fix herself. Because, she would go to a therapist or a doctor and she would tell the doctor, like, I don't have a sense of self. There's no me. It's like I wasn't even born. And the doctor would look at her like she's crazy. Now, of course, she was totally right. The problem is, though, she didn't have the right context. She didn't have enough theoretical foundation, and she didn't have the kind of environment that could support her in that, because all the people she hung around with, including her doctors and therapists, they were all clueless about non-duality and awakening. And so, it's probably a little easier now because you can go online and just Google it. This was probably before the age of the internet where you could Google this stuff easily. But eventually what happened was that it took her many years and it was gut-wrenching. She couldn't sleep. She had bad nightmares. She was stressed. She was anxious. She was she couldn't lead a normal life for many years. And it almost drove her nuts until eventually, by accident, she found some people, some meditators and some folks who knew about non-duality who actually helped her out and gave her some guidance and helped her to recontextualize that sense of no self and to make more sense of it and to realize that there's even deeper. You can even go deeper into that awakening and to realize not only is it no self, but it is the self, the God self. She wasn't understanding that there's the God self in addition to the no self. Really, it's just another additional facet, but she was missing that facet. She was missing other important facets like the facet of love and so forth. So the reason I'm telling you this story is just because so this kind of stuff can happen. That's one example of the dangers here. Other dangers might include that you get depressed and suicidal, and then you actually act that out. And, I've had some dark phases in my journey. And it's difficult. Sometimes you're all alone and you got nobody to talk to, nobody who can understand what you're going through, nobody who can help you. That's all part of this path. See, like I said at the beginning, this is a hardcore path. This is a kind of path that you have to be you have to be able to lead yourself. You have to be able to figure stuff out. You have to be able to troubleshoot your own problems. You have to be able to think independently. You can't, ultimately, when you're trying to totally awaken, you can't rely on anybody to help you. Not even your guru can help you. You're going to be totally alone at the very end of it. Now, don't worry. Once you get past all the humps and so forth, it'll be great. It's wonderful. So I'm not trying to discourage you by telling you that awakening is all negative and bad. It's not. The problem is that your ego is in the way. You see, you have defilements. You're operating from lower chakras. You're not spiritually purified. And who knows how much of that work you've got to do. That's a gut-wrenching process, this spiritual purification business. And a lot of it gets kind of not advertised by spiritual teachers. They make it seem like, oh, you just sit down, you just meditate for a few weekends, or you do a few retreats, and then bam, enlightened. That's not really how it works. Even when the so-called spontaneous, instant, total awakening happens, who do you want to cite? Eckhart Tolle or Ramana Maharshi or something like this? You want to say, oh, Leo is spontaneous instant awakening, no work, no effort, no thousands of hours of meditation, nothing, just bam, it happened. No, this is a pipe dream. It didn't just happen. Eckhart Tolle was at the brink of suicide. He was going to kill himself. By some fluke luck, he awoke rather than killing himself. See, so that's hardcore. That's serious. Think about how many people in our society, rather than awakening, they do kill themselves. More than those who awaken. I'll tell you that much. See, so that's not a very good path to take. Now, I'm not saying this to say that it has to be this way for you. I'm just saying that there's a whole range, a vast, giant range of possibilities, because you're gonna have to conquer your own ego. And what does that entail for you? For everybody, it's different. For some people, their ego is addicted to alcohol, and that's their biggest demon. And they're going to spend the next 20 years conquering that, struggling with it. And then, for others like me, alcohol has absolutely zero appeal. Zero appeal. Like, I don't care about alcohol. I'm not attracted to it whatsoever. So for me, it's so easy to stay away from it. But for some people, it's very difficult. Or with sex, or with money, or with whatever. So what is that for you? The problem is not actually having an awakening experience per se. That's almost the easy part, although it's still hard for most people. The problem is actually accepting the truth, accepting it. And then not just intellectually accepting it, although of course that is still a problem for most people. Most people, for example, they don't want to admit just something as simple as the fact that your birth was imaginary, or that science is imaginary, or that reality is imaginary. Most people don't even want to admit this on an intellectual level. But even if you do, it's not enough to just admit that intellectually. Then you have to go to the next level, and you have to say, okay, well, now how do I need to change the way that I live? How do I need to change my habits, my thoughts, and my emotions to align with that truth? You see, because right now your habits, actions, and emotions and your whole life is aligned with the opposite truth. It's aligned with the truth that reality is real, not imaginary. And so that's challenging. See, you got to be able to kind of guide yourself through this process. Now, of course, you can rely on other people. There are great teachers out there, and you can rely on certain things that I say to help to guide you, but not too much. You can't totally rely on the things that I say or other teachers say, because in the end, you got to sort of figure this puzzle out for yourself. That's the magic of life, is that nobody can really solve your puzzle for you. We all have our unique maze that we're running through, like I talked about in my Life is a Maze episode. So you're going to have to solve your own maze. You can't look at what I'm doing and then cheat the way, you used to do in first grade or something. You would cheat at your friend's test, look at the answers and just copy them. That doesn't work because we're not all working on the same test questions. It's not so simple. So yeah, if you're going to go all the way, be prepared for all sorts of stuff that comes up. Inner demons, definitely depression. There will be moments of that for sure. Because you're going to have to come face to face with meaninglessness if you're going to awaken. You can't avoid that, because meaning is what your ego projects in order to survive and to do its ego stuff. Meaning is imaginary. And at some point in your awakening process, you're going to have to accept that all meaning is imaginary and created. Now, to the ego, that's going to feel very negative and bad. It's not actually negative. It's not actually bad. It just feels that way, and it's interpreted that way by the ego. There are a lot of pathologies in the awakening process, and I'll have an entire separate episode in the future where I talk about the pathologies of awakening. There are pathologies pre-awakening, and there are pathologies post-awakening. This is ways in which, see, it's almost like the ego is one of those horror film creatures where you got to kill it all the way to kill it. Because if you just kill it halfway, it's still half alive, and it'll come in and it'll grab you and it'll get you. So that's the thing is, you have these awakenings, but then usually there's a closing down and there's a sort of a returning and a regression back to the lower chakras. It's usually hard for people to just kind of like go all the way up to the top chakra and just stay there forever and never regress down. Usually it's a sort of an oscillating process of up and down and up and down and up and down. It's going to be very trying